So I want to talk about one of my favorite things. Specifically, I want to talk about REST APIs. Right here, you'll see that I've got the Smart Hotel 360 Azure backend repository open in GitHub. This is a public repository where we have a series of REST APIs written in a variety of languages so that you can actually download them and walk through what you'll see me do today. We've already got the deploy scripts and everything out there, so if you want to try to party on it, feel free, clone the repo and let us know if you have any problems. I'm going to close this. I want to go back to my Azure portal. Now, I mentioned earlier about REST APIs and how we've got a couple of different languages. So what I'll show you is, here's the repository tree, and I've got this source folder here. Now what we've got inside of source is a series of pretty small, lightweight REST APIs. Currently, we deploy these REST APIs to various servers. We've got a few that are written in .NET, like the Bookings API, and also the Hotels API. And we currently deploy those on on-prem servers using IIS. We've also got a Tasks API and a Reviews API, both of which have this POM XML right here, indicative of the fact that these are Java APIs. These are actually Java REST APIs. And we've got a Suggestions API right here, app.js. Now, with all these different languages, we have a lot of different application servers. We have a lot of different packaging manifestos. We have a lot of different methodologies that our IT guys have to go through to deploy all these services. What's great is what we're going to do is make very few changes to this code, but we're going to containerize these things using Docker containers, and then we're going to push them up to Azure Kubernetes Service, AKS. The first thing I'll do is I'll open up this Docker Compose file. Effectively, a Docker Compose file lays down all the different packages that you're going to build and builds them all at one time. So in this case, I've got the Bookings API, the Hotels API, and so forth and so on all the way through. And you'll see that we've got a context right here that actually points over to individual Docker files. Let's take a look at one of those Docker files. So real quickly, I'll open up Bookings, and I'll show you the Docker file. Since that's a .NET Core app, what you'll see is that we're actually pulling down the base image from Microsoft's ASP.NET Core 2.03 image. That's actually up in Docker Hub. But if I wanted to talk about the Tasks API, if I were to open up that Docker file, you'll see that this is actually going to use a different base image because it's a Java app. Now, when we talk about deploying these applications, we need people in our IT staff that know how to deploy Java apps, know how to deploy .NET apps, and so forth and so on. What's great is we could actually use Visual Studio Team Services to automate the packaging up of all of these individual REST APIs into Docker containers and then pushing them out into Azure Container Registry and later on into AKS, Azure Kubernetes Service. So what I'll do now is I'll show you a little bit about how that works. So we've talked about the Docker Compose file, and I've already got these Docker images running right here on my computer. So what I'll do first is I'll do Docker images, and I'm going to grep it against Smart Hotels, because what I want to do is I want to see all the individual Smart Hotels APIs that I've already containerized sitting on my machine. Well, that's great. Now the next piece of the puzzle is actually Azure Container Registry. And the way Azure Container Registry works is that I can take all these Docker images that I've already built, put them into ACR, and then I can use that to later on push them into AKS if I want to, or if they're individual APIs and I don't need all of them in a cluster, I can actually push them directly from ACR over to Azure App Service. If I were to go down here and show you the repositories list, what you'll see in this list are the same set of containers that you just saw on my command line. The way I was able to do that is that I actually used Docker tag to tag them with the domain name of my ACR domain, which you can see I've already done here. So for each one of the guys that I have running in the Smart Hotels namespace, I've already got all of them published up to ACR as well. You can see that I've got all these images already built. Now let's talk a little bit about AKS deployment. What I'll do here is I'll open up the deploy folder. You'll see that I've got the K8S folder here. What I'll do is I'll scroll down and I'll show you services.yaml. Services.yaml is very similar to Docker Compose in the sense that what we'll do with Docker Compose is we actually build the images, but services.yaml is used for when I deploy these images up to AKS, it lays them down in the cluster and gives them all the right port number. At the same time, I've got conf.all right here, which is one configuration file that I can use to set up things like connection strings and so forth and so on. And when the Kubernetes orchestration engine wakes up and takes all these images out of ACR and puts them into AKS, it uses this file and it automatically configures everything on the fly for me. A lot less manual steps for our deployment guys. The reason we would do that is all these APIs currently access variant database backends. For the .NET APIs and a couple of the Java APIs, we're actually reaching out and we're talking to a SQL database. So right here, I'll open up SQL database, and I'm going to go ahead and go down in the portal to the connection strings tab. And it's super easy for me to wire these APIs up at build time to talk to the right database. All I need to do is paste in the connection string, and Kubernetes orchestration engine will take care of the rest. So what I would do here is I would actually wire up all the different APIs that reach out to SQL databases, or I would go back into the portal, and for the APIs that actually make use of PostgreSQL, I would do the same thing here. I would go to the connection string tab, copy out their connection string, paste it directly into the AKS config file. Now, what does that look like once it's actually running in the Kubernetes cluster? Well, these are all REST APIs, so we don't have a lot that we can actually look at on screen. However, we're using Swagger or OAI, the Open API interface. So what I can do is I can actually get the front door of my AKS cluster, which you'll see right here on screen, by doing a quick kubectl get ingresses. That'll get the front door of my cluster. And if I paste that in, you'll see that I've actually got these individual APIs hanging off different slugs. So if I open up Hotels API, you'll see now we've got the OAI, the Swagger test panel. And I can go right here, I can go to the cities API, click try it out. I can get back a list of all the cities that we have hotels in. I can copy out the ID of New York, because that's where I want to go next week. And I'll go down here to hotels in the search method, and I'll go ahead and paste in the ID of that city. And you'll see that now I've actually reached out, queried my Azure SQL database, and pulled back all the hotels in New York City. And if I were to go up here one more time and change the URL and go out to the tasks API, this time we're actually going to be hitting a Java REST API that sits on top of a PostgreSQL database. And I'll query this and you'll see that I've got everything back. So what you can see here is that we didn't really change a lot of code. Effectively, we just took our existing REST API code and we added Docker Compose files to it. And then we created a series of deployment files to instruct it how to get into AKS. And then we used AKS together with ACR to actually take our Docker images, get them into our registry, and then push them from our registry over to the Kubernetes engine.